we're in the classroom now to show you the dissolved oxygen test. Even though this is a test that will take place out at the riverbanks, we wanted to give you an opportunity to be able to see the test as it's done and the color changes and focus just on that rather than the river for the time being. So today Mr. Matthew and I have the dissolved oxygen test kit, which is the first thing that you'll need to make sure that you have when you go to do your test, and make sure that you have everything in it. So here is the Hach dissolved oxygen test kit that we're going to be using and taking with us out to the river. And you can tell this is the Hach dissolved oxygen test kit because it says Hach DO, and DO is obviously for dissolved oxygen. And right there it says oxygen dissolved. Now Mr. Matthews is going to show you what's in the kit and make sure that you have all the parts necessary to perform your tests.
Okay, we're going to pull out the directions, your direction card, and go through what's in the kit. This is your sampling bottle filled with river water. These two together, the smaller one is a measuring tube. The square bottle is a mixing bottle. You have nail clippers to open the chemical packets. You have 3 packets of chemical mixtures, packet number 1, packet number 2, and in the big jug over here, packet number 3. The last item in here is a liquid chemical called sodium thiosulfate. So that's the materials you need. We're now going to go through and see how you use them as you run your test.
Now that we have all our equipment for doing our dissolved oxygen test, we want to make sure that we have our safety equipment on, because anytime you come in contact with river water or that you use the chemicals that we have here, you'll need to have your safety equipment on. So we're going to start by both of us putting on our splash goggles and our disposable gloves. And you'll get good at putting these gloves on, let me tell you. It takes a little bit of practice to get those 5 fingers into those 5 spots.
Put them in the right opening.
We got them. Okay, you got your equipment on? I got my equipment on, ready to begin our test.
Now that we're safety prepared, we're going to go back to the river and collect a water sample and bring you back here and then show you how to run the test on that sample. Now that you have your properly collected water sample, we're going to take you through the details of this test step by step. Use the clippers to open 1 dissolved oxygen 1 reagent powder pillow and 1 dissolved oxygen 2 reagent powder pillow.
Okay, you're going to see in your kit that you have a big packet of reagent pillows, and then one's labeled reagent 1 and one's labeled reagent 2. So I'm going to take reagent 1, and these are kind of hard to work with when you're doing this, so you kind of have to wiggle them up a little bit and get the powder to settle into the bottom before you clip it open. And it should say right on the packet, it should say dissolved oxygen 1. So make sure you have them right, and you take your clippers and you just clip it across to open it up. And then you can probably use your fingers to open it up the rest of the way. And just clip off a corner and then pop it open, okay? So that you can see that the powder's in there, all right? And you can set that down after you get the first one, and then open up the second one. And notice, like, I'm not pouring a whole bunch out because the other classes have to use this, and you want to make sure that you don't lose them or mix them up or anything like that. And then I'm looking at this, and this has a different color on it. It's a white face. It says dissolved oxygen number 2. So I'm doing the same thing with it. I'm starting with the clippers, cutting through the foil, and then ripping it open the rest of the way, and then making sure I got it open. And that's kind of tricky. You may have to mess around with it a little bit, like I'm going to do right now.
You're then going to add the contents of each of the pillows to the bottle.
Okay, so now I got both of them open, and I'm going to put them in, and this is perhaps the hardest part in terms of lab technique to do, because you don't want to add oxygen bubbles to the water. So you want to lift the stopper straight out, take your dissolved oxygen packet number 1, get it in there, pour it in, and make sure you get all of the powder in from the packet because it's been pre-measured for you. So spend a little bit of time and care while you do this. There's number 1, and I made sure that I got all the powder, that there's no more powder. And here's number 2. And notice I kind of pinch it open a little bit and pour it in. There's number 2. I'm trying not to be sloppy. I'm trying to take as much care in this as I can and get the last little bit of powder out of that. And then what do I do next, Bud?
Then you stopper the bottle carefully to exclude air bubbles.
Okay, this is the tough part I was telling you about. And you want to stick that stopper kind of straight down and in. And I got real lucky there, and I didn't get any air bubbles in it, okay? And that's the key, okay? You don't want any little air bubbles. If you've got a whole bunch of little air bubbles there, you may basically get garbage data. So you want to be careful with that.
Grip the bottle and stopper firmly. Shake vigorously to mix.
Here we go.
A flocculant or flock precipitate will be formed. If oxygen is present in the sample, the precipitate will be brownish-orange in color. A small amount of powdered reagent may remain stuck to the bottom of the bottle. This will not affect the results.
Okay, I see a little bit of powdered reagent stuck to the bottom, but Mr. Matthew told me I didn't have to worry about it. I've got a brown-orange color. I've got oxygen. Okay? Now what do I do, Mr. Matthew?
We have to allow the sample to stand until the flock has settled halfway down in the bottle.
So you get kind of a chunky stuff like a Freezy or a Frosty or something forming in there, okay? And we're going to let that settle. And I got a little bit of water on my hands, but I didn't get it on my hands because I have my gloves on, okay? So now we're going to let this settle, and then we're going to come back to continue our test.
As you can see, we've allowed the flock to settle all the way down until the upper half of the bottle is clear. We're now going to shake the bottle again, and then again let it stand until the upper half of the bottle is clear. As you can see, we've let the bottle sit for 4 or 5 minutes now, and the flock has once again settled to the bottom half of the bottle. Step 4 is to use the clippers to open one dissolved oxygen 3 reagent powder pillow.
These powder pillars for reagent 3 are much easier to work with because they're little plastic tubes. But again, you'll need the clippers. And you got to clip these things open. There we go. And pour the contents right in there.
Mr. Pisco will next carefully restopper the bottle and shake to mix. The flock will disappear and a yellow color will develop if oxygen is present. We're still getting powder out of there. There we go.
There it goes. When you restopper this, now the oxygen is being fixed. I'm still trying to keep my air bubbles out, and I've still done a pretty good job. All right. And now I'm going to shake it up a little bit to mix. And again, you can see why I have my gloves on. And the precipitate is disappearing. All that flocculant is disappearing, and I just have a nice amber color with some little chunks of chemical in there from packet number 3.
What you want to do now is fill the plastic measuring tube full of the sample prepared in steps 1 through 4. That's what we've just done. So this is a measured out tube of a precise amount. And then he will pour that sample into the square mixing bottle.
Okay, notice I filled it to the rim. Stake this, put it on top. Okay, and here's where we start to get fun as chemists. invert it, drop it down, and now I have the exact amount I want out into my mixing bottle. And we're going to run our titration. So we have to open up the sodium thiosulfate bottle. And sometimes this can be tricky. A lot of kids have problems with this. You kind of got to lift and squeeze. Get some sodium thiosulfate into your eyedropper. And now you're going to run your titration. Make sure you get it right in there. And carefully drop. There's number 1. And swirl. 2. Swirl. 3. Swirl it after each drop. 4. 5. Do not lose count of your drops. You got to really focus on what you're doing. 6. 7. 8. 9. And now you can see that after 9 drops, it's clear compared to the original water that we started with, which was kind of a amber color. We've cleared it up, and it took 9 drops of sodium thiosulfate to make it clear. Now that you've completed the test, the next thing you have to do is, as we've mentioned before in our introduction, you have to repeat the test several more times to collect your data. Make sure you get several trials. In this case, for dissolved oxygen, you want to run 3 good trials. So the first thing you have to do is dispose of your solid waste. And we have a solid waste disposal container that goes in there. Make sure you get everything. We don't want to leave anything back at the river. And then we want to dispose of our chemical wastes that have the chemicals in them. And obviously we don't want to pour them into the river that we're trying to take care of. So you pour that right back into a container that we have that's marked wastewater. And then also this gets back in there. And in preparation for running your tests again, what you need to do is you need to have some dissolved water, deionized water, and we have that. And you want to rinse everything out really good, including your mixing bottle, your water collection bottle, because this is going to go back into the river, and your measuring bottle. Mix everything real well, and then pour that mixed water back into the waste container as well. Okay? And do that a couple of times so that you have clean equipment that you're starting over with again. Okay, so rinse it out a couple of times, and then you're ready to collect some more data. Okay, hopefully you'll have a little bit better deionized water bottle than the one I got.
Try this one.
Okay. Ah, that's better. Not much, but a little. Okay? So now you're ready to do your tests over again for a second and then a third time. If you notice, for example, that we got 10 drops of sodium thiosulfate the first time, and you get data that's vastly different from that, maybe you got 15 or 20 drops, you need to consider where you may have gone wrong, because the data should be fairly consistent since it's the same river and approximately the same time that you're collecting the data from. Record that in your lab notebook, and you're ready to go back to the lab to do some calculations.